Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you making time to join us for this session. I hope we can make it an amazing session and a great use of your time. So, first, let me start. My name is Sav Ketan. I'm from Tealium, Director of Product Marketing and Strategy. And with me, I have Morgan. Morgan, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Morgan Gardia. I'm the SVP of Client Strategy at Zion and Zion, and I'm excited to be here with everybody today. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. So, our session today, as you guys know, is avoiding CDP pitfalls and expert insights and prevention strategies. And Morgan being our expert there. So, I am very excited to hear the experience that Morgan has and the lessons that she's brought for us. So, first, I want to start with thanking you, Morgan and Zion. You guys showed up at Digital Velocity last week, our conference, and the sessions you all had, you shared so many real world examples and stats. One of the sessions for our listeners, it was all the problems that people are having implementing CAPI. And they had actual problems people were having with the percentages of how often those issues occur. And it just really got us thinking about how helpful it is for audiences to see that they're not alone, that everybody has these problems. And that's kind of what led us to this session. So I want to just start with the white paper.
Yeah.
Um, Zion and Zion, which we call ZNZ. ZNZ put out this white paper about issues and problems people are having with CDP. And it starts with this big stat that 51%, only 51% of CDP implementations people consider successful, which means 49% are failing. That number caught me by surprise. So I want to ask Morgan, did you feel the same way when the numbers came?
You know, I wish I could say that I was fully surprised. I think we'd encountered a couple of instances of working with clients who I think probably would have said that they fell within the answer of we're somewhat failing or totally failing with the current state of our CDP. I think the good news is that was just a current state impression of where their CDP integration or project within their organization is, and there's always room to go up. So it doesn't mean that just because these people are failing that they're going to churn or eliminate the CDP. They can't. So really what this allows us to do is uncover the reasons why they feel like they're failing and try to turn that around.
That's really helpful. So I've always felt that doing these kind of digital transformation or maturity is it's always a spectrum. It's never a black or white.
Exactly.
So I'm kind of curious, like, what does failure mean to you? Like, people are self-reporting that in the
Yeah.
survey. So how do you see the word failure in a CDP implementation context?
You know, I think for most times when our team is working with organizations or teams who are saying that they're failing, it's that they've either gotten past a few use cases that they've been able to implement and now they're blocked because they're unable to get that roadmap built out or continue to get to that walk or run phase of their CDP implementation, or they're just not getting the teams around them all engaged enough to prioritize and focus on moving ahead. Another thing we see is just they've gotten a couple use cases implemented, but they don't know how to measure the return on that investment. So they're saying we think it's working, but we don't actually have the data that tells us that yes, we are successful. And so sometimes it's just going back and making sure that we can help organizations measure the return on investment for the activations that they're deploying from their CDP.
Wow. Okay. So it could be, well, we were not able to get the CDP off the ground. It could be we did the first couple of use cases we thought, but then we never did more when we were hoping. It could be that we got a little bit done, but it was huge amount of effort, and then it felt like the juice was not worth the squeeze. And then finally, I loved your last point, which was maybe it's working, but I can't prove that it's working. So now I'm not able to keep going with that stuff, right? Wow, like so, yeah, failure not like a like a race where I didn't make it or something.
Right.
It's just a mindset. It could be a mind. It could be a feeling. It could be current state evaluation. It could be failure too, but it's a lot of things. So, okay, so that with that context, and you guys having done this survey, I would love to hear, like, what do you see as the reasons that people are feeling this way, and what are causing some of these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, by and large, it's not the actual CDP or the platform that's been chosen. We actually found that of all of the factors contributing to failure, that was the least selected. Only 28% of people thinking that it was that they chose the wrong
Oh,
product.
wow.
More times than not, it was organizational factors such as a lack of cross functional collaboration between teams, the lack of there being a clear strategy or goals that the organization needs to achieve by implementing the CDP, no unifying framework that says how we should implement a CDP or manage this, change management. And then, another one that I think is important to call out is a lot of people reported that there's just not enough time in the day. Most people already had a full time job that was keeping them busy. And then, somebody said, hey, we're going to get this CDP. Now we need to carve out more hours out of our day to implement this technology or platform.
I love that last one. I feel I could say that for my life daily. Okay, so first, before I keep going, for anybody in the audience, I can imagine that you're feeling issues in your own way. So just like throw us a question if you want us to address something specific that you're feeling or you want us to cover a topic. But we're going to talk about each of the issues that Morgan just mentioned and then talk about ways that you guys could address those problems. And honestly, even though I work at Tealium, this is very helpful for me too because so my experience before I joined Tealium was very similar. I was helping customers choose martech tools, and the first thing we would say to them is, you probably already have the right tool because you have so many tools in your stack. Let's see what we could do with what you already have. A new tool is not always the answer, and in fact most often it's not the right answer. So I like that you said that only 30% felt that it was the tool that was the issue. And that's a great place to start. So let's go through some of the things you talked about, right? And I like to usually start at the top. So let's start with defining the right objectives or having a clear idea of why you're doing this. So,
Yeah.
and I don't know how much you can share, but can you give us an example, maybe a specific customer?
Yeah, absolutely. So we engaged with a customer who had implemented a CDP, and they came to us basically saying, every month we're hitting our volume limits, and we don't know why, and we don't really know if we should keep paying for these overages because we don't know what we're getting for what we're paying for this product. So we did a quick audit just to assess, okay, let's see what you have set up. And really what we discovered was uh, it kind of felt like the teams knew what they were supposed to do, but they didn't know why. So we felt that IT was given an order to, okay, hook up the CDP, here are the data sources. And they set them up, but they really didn't have a strategy behind what fields of data should be coming in, how we should enrich this data. There was no campaign oriented thinking to say, once it's in the CDP, what are we going to do with it? So really what we felt like, and we came back to them with that audit, was you're misusing the platform completely. You're really using it as a data pipeline, but you're not really using it for the purpose that it was designed, which is to enrich audiences and activate them in a way that you can't do when you just have all of the tools disparate and spread across your organization.
That I've heard that in others discussions too, where a lot of tools are now going away from profile-based pricing or audience-based pricing, and they're starting to realize that just because you have the data doesn't mean you put everything in the CDP.
Right.
Just because you put the data in the CDP doesn't mean it's going to be used. And all these platforms have so much compute that
Yeah.
the more data you put in, the more your costs go up.
Right.
So I do feel like few years ago we were getting the message, collect all the data, and now I think people are realizing that that's not helpful even from a data privacy point of view. uh,
Right.
so yeah, I love that point you made, that if you're hitting your cost early and quickly, if you're feeling like it's way more expensive than you imagine, it probably means that you're putting a lot of data through this,
Right.
and you're probably not using the CDP surgically, and you're
Mhm.
using it like a flashlight and not like a laser. So that's what you got to think about a little bit. I see a question in here from Tofi, and it feels relevant to what we were going to talk about. So let me just read this question to you. One of the challenges I see is that marketing and sales are not aligned in order to have good ROI on the CDP. At the last organization, they reduced their CDP investment from hundred thousands to only tens of thousands because they felt like they both the teams were not on the same page. So I feel like this goes well to our next one, maybe, of
Yeah.
implementation errors in unified strategies. I find that CDP affects so many groups. You kind of have to get everybody to the table. So
Yep.
let's talk about that one. Getting alignment, implementation, unifying strategies. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think just to address the question a little bit before I dive into that is I think, sales and marketing, it's not uncommon for us to see conflict or, dis- different ideas for how to get to the same goal. I think what we can do is think about putting the customer as the North Star and think about what your customer journey is and those key touch points along the sales process, and then use a campaign oriented journey like thinking or process of, okay, how do we ensure that we get the right communications in front of these customers, give them the best customer experience, and then go back and decide, okay, what are the use cases that we're going to build to make sure that their experiences are the best. And usually if you do that customer oriented use case development, sales and marketing aligns very quickly, because now you're both working in the same direction to achieve the same goal, which is ensuring that your future or current customers have the best experience with your brand.
Yeah, either retention or acquisition or engagement,
Right.
whichever way you think about it. When you get to that customer problem, then everybody speaks the same language.
Yep.
If you're looking at the metrics along the way, then you feel like you're misaligned. I feel that even at Tealium, so that makes a lot of sense. Um, and did you have any example of maybe somebody that you dealt with implementation issues and things like that?
I would say one of the areas that we had where we were trying to build trust in the CDP that we were failing to do so is a great example. So we were introduced to a national retail brand that had both brick and mortar and an e-com experience. And when they initially implemented their CDP, we were having a really hard time building trust within the organization that we were improving the customer experience, just because they were having a hard time finding parity between their CDP and their lifecycle marketing tool. And what we found in the end is that the CDP was working off event based rules and the lifecycle marketing was working off time based rules. And so we had to work with the organization to make sure that audiences were getting updated um, to stay in parity, and that those communications from or the audiences in the CDP and the lifecycle marketing tool were unified. And once we came in and helped them at that intersection of where the CDP connected with the lifecycle marketing tool, we were really able to get them to have trust within the technology and then build out future use cases. But our point of contact there was really stalled until her C suite really felt that they were going to really enhance that customer experience. So I would say that's a perfect example where within the organization, we had to create alignment across multiple
Mm.
teams and decision makers in order for that organization to find success. And so really the failure they were having was just understanding the specifics of all of the tools within their stack, and unifying that, those key points of intersection to make sure that everything was working and aligned within the tech stack.
I love that point because one of the mis expectations that I feel people have is that think that the CDP will replace the strategies that they're doing in their other tools. But all these other tools, CRM tools, CMS tools, personalization tools, they are fantastic. They have been evolving for years. They're very mature. So the CDP is not trying to replace them. CDP is trying to make them have the same inputs and
Right.
have the same source. So
Yep.
I feel like that's a great point that the CDP is not actually replacing your other tools; it's augmenting your other tools,
Yep.
and I think that really helps. So there's a question I see here that what are the best 2 or 3 tips? This is a question from Thomas. What are the best tips, or what are some tips for to pursue to define an overall unified strategy? And I feel like you had also mentioned the cost of data without a strategy. So I would love to hear how you think about that and what recommendation you have, whether you have an example.
Yeah, so within Zion and Zion, we have a center of excellence specific to our CDP practice. And as we've built this practice, we've created a number of frameworks that help guide us and our clients to use, quite honestly, structured thinking when it comes to what is the strategic objective that we want to achieve, and what are the components that must be true for us to meet that objective. So within one specific framework we have, there are 8 components that cross several different teams that all need to be factored and considered when launching a use case. So a really good example of that is we'll be thinking about the customer. What are the attributes that we can take for a customer to build an audience? And for that customer, where are they in your customer journey? What are the touch points they're receiving from your brand? What is the context that they are currently in this decision-making process that we can put into consideration to make sure that we're thinking about the right activation? Is that email? Is that SMS? Is that media, etc.? And then within that same framework, we're also talking about what can we do to test and measure to make sure what we're implementing is successful. Because I think an experience we've all had is we launch something, we think it's great, we go back and we report on it, and somebody inevitably says, well, can you break up that reporting to show me how X reported against Y? And we say, well, we didn't put that into consideration when we launched the campaign. So if you want the answer, we have to do it again. And this time we'll set up the proper taxonomy to make sure we can measure on that result for you. And I mean, 9 times out of 10, that's just because marketing and analytics weren't aligned before something deployed. But if they were, then we would have all of the answers and get to those proof points of success so much faster.
Yeah, what a great point. I think this is another area that I'm finding CDPs are helping. So back in the day, in my earlier days in life, I think what you said was very true. If we didn't tag it with that right intention, if we didn't plan how we wanted to measure, then that's we were just out of luck. What we did was what we had. Now with the CDP, you do have the ability to quickly adjust your data layer, quickly adjust your audiences and your attributes, and try again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great mindset to bring into your process. Please, the one thing I can share with our audience, this is an iterative process. I can tell you that right now. No matter what you do, there is no one right answer. You don't start and stay the course from the same first day. Based on your business, based on your customers, based on your channels, your resources, this just keeps evolving. So if you go in with that mindset, that what can I learn from this particular starting point, then your next one will be that much better, and then it'll be that much better. So I love that point that you just made.
Yeah,
And that. Sorry, go ahead. Did I cut you off?
we have a philosophy here: fail fast and iterate. So as soon as we realize that something's not going the way we want it to, we want to iterate very quickly. I think the benefit of working with a partner like us is we've seen some of those fails, so we can help prevent some of them so that you don't have to live through the same pains. But I agree. The environment's always evolving, and what was true yesterday is not true to today.
Man, so that makes me think of the next point. And Michael and Meredith and Andrew, I see your questions, so we'll get to them. Okay, just trying to stay with the flow. I love, you talked about before, and it was in the white paper as well, about managing expectations and having realistic goals and timelines. Probably what led to the point that I wish there was more hours in the day.
Yep.
So, and then there's a point here from Andrew about, you mentioned about the alignment between the CDP and the lifecycle tool, but that's more than just explaining the differences. How do you actually set the people up for success? So yeah, can you talk about that a little bit? And if you have an example, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so we worked with a global brand who was wanting to use their CDP as an avenue to monetize ads. They collect a ton of customer data. So they were, in a position where fortunately they could monetize on some of that. The marketing team and another team within the organization, a business team, said, okay, we think the CDP is the route to do this. They went through the procurement process and brought a technology on board. And then when we really drilled down to the solutions architecture and how data would flow within their existing systems and through the CDP, what we found was the organization had several robust systems, but also some systems that they had built themselves that didn't necessarily lean towards, a tool that has a ton of built-in integrations for that quick connectivity and ability to ingest data. And furthermore, as we continue to talk to those teams, we discovered that for the next 3 to 4 quarters, their sprints were planned. So they did not have a dedicated resource that could go back to this project and say, okay, let's look at these systems and how we can get this set up as quickly as possible. So a combination of, not having aligned teams before you're investing in the tool and building your strategy for how you want to use it, and there not being enough time in the day. So really for that organization, they had to take a step back and say, okay, if monetizing ad revenue is a priority for us, then we're going to need to build and dedicate a team that can focus on this project for us to meet the deadlines that we need to, because building it the timeline within everything else the organization had going on would have made this project go on for 2, 3, 4 years or beyond. So
Yeah, you cannot do this in your spare time. That's just not going to work, right? At Tealium, when we are meeting with the new customer, first question we ask them is, "Are you having dedicated people on this, or are they going to do it in their spare time?" Because it changes the whole conversation.
absolutely.
And the CDP, while it can do a lot of things, it doesn't solve the problem by itself. It's like, I want to run a marathon. Yes, I'm taking some supplement to run that marathon. Doesn't mean I don't have. I have to still practice. I have to still prepare. I have to still get ready.
Yep.
You got to do all the work. And I want to go to the next area of suggestion and recommendation, which is your center of excellence, right? So you've talked about that before. I know Zion and Zion talks about that a lot. But don't you have organizational silos, and how do you overcome that to go to the center of excellence? I can imagine if that is your bread and butter, you probably have to handle that roadblock quite a bit.
Right, absolutely. I would say going into this example, and this is one we've experienced quite often, is there will typically be a CDP champion who's identified within the organization, and they are going to sit on one team, but it takes more than one team to facilitate the change management required for the CDP implementation. And if they don't have the ability to tap into the team members across the organization to work together, those rigid silos within an organization will slow you down so quickly. So really, in this instance, we had an organization who their champion was in IT. He had done a lot of work to get the CDP implemented, get some initial use cases up and running. And then really the baton was passed to marketing to say, we invested in this amazing tool for you. Now you can do all of these use cases and activate all of this data exactly how you want to on your marketing channels. But it really isn't a pass of the baton. It's a constant coordination back and forth. And anytime they had a question or they wanted to ingest a new data source or they wanted new fields ingested, they would have to go back to IT and say, okay, now I need this, and now I need that, and now I need this. And they just really were not planned for that coordination across teams. And I have to say, you can't throw your sandbag over the wall and think that, one team's done and the next team's ready to go. You've got to keep that constant communication back and forth. So a lot of times what we're doing when we're coming into an engagement is saying, okay, who are the key players? And if it's only one department, then we say, okay, let's talk about building a CDP center of excellence within your organization. And here are the key people who we think you need to start bringing into this project if you're going to reach success.
I love that. I'm a sports fan, and I feel like if you look at a team sport, you can never win or lose because of one person in a team sport. It's just not going to happen. And the fact that CDP is bringing omni-channel data together, and the CDP is enabling cross-channel strategies for you guys. Just that alone makes it something that a lot of people need to not just participate, but take ownership. Right? That's what you need here. The
Absolutely.
data is coming from different places. It's going to different places. It's being used for different things. It affects many, many tools and many, many groups. So you guys all have to take ownership on this together. Otherwise, it will not just be as impactful for your org as it can be. So I have there's a really nice question here that sort of builds on this from Meredith. They have been working on a project by project basis. How could they unify their projects, probably across channels, probably across groups, because the CDP probably touches all these projects. So how do you start combining probably a spaghetti situation to make it feel a little bit more organized?
Right. I think, again, that's where I hate to lean back to having a framework, but I would say absolutely having a framework that defines what are your strategic objectives and then how are you going to achieve those strategic objectives. And I, I think we're always talking about abandoned cart or suppression, but they're examples that are very easy for organizations to comprehend and understand. So when you're doing an abandoned cart use case and that customer finally makes the purchase that you want them to, that means you need to stop any abandoned cart messaging across your website, your media, your email. Those are three different technologies that often different people are managing within the organization. So just in the instance of that one use case, it shows the importance of bringing those teams together so that you have a coordinated effort of what is the objective and how can we achieve it, and what's important for you and the email marketing team to understand, or what do we need to send you to suppress users from continuing to get those abandoned cart emails? What do we need to send you, web personalization team, to make sure that when that user lands on our site, we don't have that pop-up that says you might have left some stuff in your cart because it's not there anymore. So we just have to make sure that we're bringing those teams and unifying them together based on each strategic objective. And you can make a roadmap that's a crawl, walk, run roadmap where you do go use case by use case or customer experience by customer experience. And usually we find that those are the organizations that are really successful because they can check something off as being complete and done before they move on to the next project.
Yeah.
So that you don't feel like you have all of these kind of loose ends for each use case that continue to linger. So it's great for those internal teams to have those sprints where they're marking something off as being done and reaching success.
I love that example. It's not just don't do many things at once. Don't try to do many things part way. Do fewer things but complete them so
Right.
you can understand what it takes. Another recommendation we used to make in my agency days to our clients was, pick your two main channels and get them integrated first, right? Email and web used to be the most common before mobile shows up. Then once you're feeling good about that, then maybe bring a third channel into the mix and see what use case gets unlocked with that third channel. Don't go straight from one channel to five channels. There's too many people. I used to say people who don't normally work together, if you suddenly need them to work together, you need to give them a little bit of time to figure this out, right? So start small, learn, iterate, find success. One question I like from Elizabeth here quite a bit is they're trying to do personalization. They have 10 million monthly unique visitors, but when they start doing CDP use case for personalization, they end up with a very, very small audience, right? That
Mhm.
happens. Now we have all these attributes. We want to build that highly specific audience, and suddenly the audience just shrinks down to like a really inefficient number. So
Right.
what is your recommendation there? Because I heard that question a lot.
Yeah, I think, we recently wrote a white paper about testing for small audiences. And what are some of the considerations that you can do if you can't reach that true consensus that an A B test has statistical significance? Again, I think put your customer at the core of the personalization and what you want to achieve for the customer to make sure that you're bettering their experience. I would also say, start big. And before you slice and dice those audiences too much, just start with, a simple use case with, a broader personalization approach, and then start to do that slicing as you go. And of course, you are going to have to make some some decisions in any testing circumstance where you either have to lower the confidence score or run a longer test in order to get that significance. But if you truly feel that it's, providing your customer with a better experience, then, keep that as your North Star.
Yeah, it's a tough one because it's almost trial and error sometimes. But what we used to recommend to our customers also is if you had five criteria to build that audience and you suddenly shrunk, take out one, the lowest important one, and see what
Right.
happens, and just try play with that. But yeah, that's the biggest issue these days is it's so easy to say go build that audience, but you got to also figure out which audience will be effective. That's why
Right.
audience sizing is such a big part of our strategy. I would be remiss if we moved on without talking about sensitive data or data governance, data deletion, things like that. So I would love to hear in all this recommendations, where does data privacy fit in your strategy, in your framework? How do you counsel customers on that?
Yeah, I think consent and data governance is, priority number one. First of all, we know that customers are landing on your site today, and the first thing they're being hit with is, accept all, modify, decline. We want as many customers to hit success or hit accept as possible because that allows us as marketers to receive the data that we need for those personalized experiences. So, we obviously want to ensure that the experience that you're giving your customers, you're building trust within your brand, that they feel confident to hit that accept button, which means anytime you misuse their data, you're going to lose that trust. So let's get those systems set up first and foremost. I think another thing that we've talked about a lot within our organization is that you can do some testing on that consent banner to help improve your opt-in rates, so that don't just put it up and say it's good and think that you can never increase the number of people who are opting in. Like, you can test that messaging and make sure you're being compliant, but not affect your ability to collect that really critical zero and first party data that you need. So start there. And then, of course, work with us, work with Tealium, whatever your consent management system is or your data governance system. Make sure that that is being communicated loud and clear across all of your divisions within your organization so that once you've built that trust for that customer to hit accept, they don't go back and change those settings later.
Yeah. Oh my Lord. My wife makes fun of me for saying that so much, but I think the fact is that consent is part of our future,
It is
and
what
it
it is.
should be. And your CDP most likely will give you a way to do data deletion to organize by customer. Telium does that, no
Mhm.
problem. But I would say most current CDPs will give you that benefit because without that, really the CDP doesn't serve its purpose completely. But you have to plan that for your environment. Where are you collecting consent? Where are you storing it? When are you offering data deletion? How are you handling that? I think a lot of that is strategy, planning, integration. No
Right.
one tool, I think, will address that for you guys, but you got to plan that from the beginning. If you make it, if you come to it after the fact, usually the cost and the effort to get there is quite a bit. So, Andrew, I like your next question. I'll get to that in a bit. Okay. I just want to keep going here. So, one of the things you said at the beginning, Morgan, was the tool is usually 28 to 30% of the issue, not the bulk of the issue, right? So, I want to talk about the tool now because everything else we talked about was working with the tool or figuring out the organizational approach. But how does the tool fit into this? What if you get a customer who does not know what tool they need to buy?
Right.
And then what is your recommendation and how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great example. I think we're now being faced with two questions from our customers. One, if they haven't invested in a CDP yet, they're asking us, how do we choose something from this very complex marketplace? We know that the definition of CDP is still in an early adaptation or phase, and that the products within a CDP all vary. So it can be very hard for people who don't live in this space to compare apples to apples. So we'll absolutely help customers with building out their RFI, that RFP, joining calls with CDP partners so that we can make sure that we're asking questions that they would never dream of thinking of asking. We're also starting to get more and more customers who are coming in saying, okay, maybe we don't think the CDP is the right one. Do I need to be considering another one? And then, of course, what we're doing is, first assessing, is this the right tool or is it not the right tool? And if it's not, really helping them weigh the level of effort to change platforms. Because as much as we've talked about how much change management it takes to integrate a CDP within your organization, to kind of pull that thread and unravel it to switch to another platform is a whole nother level of complexity. Like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think if we ask people today, would you change your CRM? Like, the heart palpitations you get from that are just
Mm.
insane.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, what we're trying to do is make sure that we're helping our clients make the right decision the right time and then set them up for success so they really feel confident in the choice that they've made for their organization.
I love that message, and I want our audience to hear, even from the Tilium point of view. You know, I don't believe, I have never believed this, that every tool is right for everybody. That just not how software works. Every software has a different philosophy. They come from a different origin. They approach data slightly differently, and you got to see how it fits in your environment, your way of working, your skill set, your existing technology. These are all very big factors.
Mhm.
So please don't assume that just because it's called a CDP, it's the same thing,
Right.
and just because it worked for somebody, it's going to work for you. Not at all the case. I know it doesn't make it easy, but unfortunately, this entire topic and this entire category, while it sounds simple, it is not easy. And a lot of the frustration comes because people expect it to be easy. It's just not going to be that way. So, as we get towards the ending, I want to give our audience a way to think about what they can do. I don't want this to feel like it's a daunting task.
Right.
And you've mentioned center of excellence quite a bit. So let's go there, right? What should we recommend to our audience? What can they take from this? What can they bring back to their world?
Yeah, so I often reference a white paper that Tealium wrote, The Organization of the Future, where your team already did some of the legwork to say, depending on who the champion within your organization is, here are some proposed ideas for what your center of excellence could look like across the organization. Typically, our first conversations are just going to for us to ask an organization and say, who do you have today that you feel is going to be part of this change management of your organization to onboard a CDP? What is their existing experience with working with a technology like this so that we can help that organization either define the people who we think they should bring along, or if we see some gaps, that we can help augment those gaps for them as an agency partner. And really, what our objective is to go in and help you learn how to fish, not just give you the fish, because there's a learning curve here. And if you don't already have a CDP, there's a lot for these organizations to learn as they're onboarding this technology. And the good news is that we are typically doing an MVP or a proof of concept, or we're starting with some of the most basic use cases so that we can bring you along the way with some of the initial implementation and then build out that product roadmap for you to be successful in the future. But yeah, I mean, that's just a conversation we have to say, because if we join an engagement and it's a party of one who's running the CDP, then that means that we're going to bring more people from our team forward so that we have a solutions engineer who's talking to your engineering team. We have lifecycle marketing tool members who are talking to your email marketing team. We have our media people who are part of our center of excellence talking to either your agency or your in-house media team so that they can really learn the value of the intersection of taking your customer profiles and audiences within the CDP and activating them.
I love it. I love that message. I can just tell you, the audience, that the data, IT has a very big role to play no matter how you look at this world, right? And then the integrations, you automatically end up with having to work with multiple channels and
Mm-hmm.
teams. Then you have data privacy. These
Mm-hmm.
are three organizations that you cannot ignore. And then you have marketing. Now, regardless of how you implement the CDP, your way of working will evolve. And
Correct.
the more everybody else is on the same page, the more you can evolve together. So there is a huge amount of value in implementing a CDP, but it's not going to just show up on its own. It's
Right.
going to take work even after you get the tool and even after you get it set up. So just approach it that way, and it'll make a big difference. So we have two really nice questions that I want to take. So
Absolutely.
Andrew's question was building on what you just said about the center of excellence. That it is great to have completing the use cases, check them off, show the value, and then keep building. So he's saying in the crawl, what do you typically start with an MVP? Do you then build a backlog out for longer term? And then how do you keep the momentum going? What are some example use cases that they could use to go crawl, walk, run? I think that's a great question, actually.
I think that's a wonderful question. And usually, what I start with is looking at some of the activations you currently have going without a CDP. So, if you're already managing abandoned cart in media and abandoned cart email systems, but they're just not integrated, or you're not enriching some of those, the people who fall within an abandoned cart audience, start there because you can create parity with what you're already doing and then introduce the CDP because you already have a measure of success that you're working from. So start with the things that you're already doing. And then, in the nature of doing that, you'll start introducing teams who already have an understanding of their place. So, say you have an email marketer who's already running abandoned cart. Now, introducing the CDP with the foundation of what they already know about their space, it will feel less intimidating. And then once they see the success of, oh my gosh, this is so great, I don't have to go in and manually update these suppression lists, or this works so much better, you're getting their buy-in to the value and the benefit of the CDP, and they'll only want to go to the next use case and the next use case and the next use case. Same with your media teams. If they have to do a lot less manual list updating or audience building, and the CDP is supporting that, as soon as you start running some campaigns and the ROAS are higher, they're going to be like, great, this is awesome. What's the next audience I can activate? So you're just building the demand within your organization. And now you've got your email and your media team shouting from the rooftop, oh my gosh, this is the best platform. Now your web team is going to come in and say, well, what can I do with it? What can I do with it? How can we keep advancing this?
That's it.
You really just, it's a grassroots effort of building that demand by, building those proof points, but start with what people already know as a foundation instead of saying, we're going to build a brand new use case with this brand new platform and nobody really knows what they're doing. Like, that is not a recipe for success.
Yeah, I love that recommendation. Like, the fact is, the CDP is not a magic solution, but it is an enabler, right? So if you did the 80/20 and you took the 20% use cases in each of your strategies that were giving you 80% of the value, and you
Yep.
just put them through the CDP, your teams already know what to expect. They will be able to see the lift that the CDP has given them. They will
Right.
be able to feel the efficiency that the CDP has given them, and then they'll know how to apply that to. So I love that recommendation. Start with what you know, start with what you're already doing and what you already works for your business, then do new stuff. Don't do new stuff out the door. So yeah, okay, we have time for more questions, guys. If anybody wants to do more questions, I like the question from Pamela.
Yep.
This is one we get a lot. So is there an overlap in use cases between CDPs and clean rooms for advertising, especially with first party data and especially with brands who do not have a lot of first party data? That's a great question. So yeah.
So this is a question we get a lot as it pertains to clean rooms and retail media networks of how can we partner with, other technologies or ad tech platforms who may have more on the data that we want to target in our advertising efforts than we do. So what we would say is take a step back and look at what are your zero and first party data strategies so that you can start collecting the data that you own so that when you go to utilize a clean room or a retail media network, you have more to share with that vendor or that partner. And that's going to be a necessity to get the success out of that partnership. So I know in the case of CPG that sometimes, brands are saying, well, what can I do to collect data on my customers? Start with some of the anonymous behavioral touch points that people are having with your brand, and then move forward to that consented known data. See what you can do with what you have today, but just make sure your data layer is set up to collect those events. Make sure that you have you're building ideas of how you can collect that zero and first party data. Look at what you already have on your site. You may have some opportunities where you're missing collecting data just because you have a sign up for a newsletter in your footer versus having it higher up on the site for somebody to capture it, or when somebody's coming to your site and they're sharing something across social media, you don't have the right mechanism in place to collect that customer data through that touch point. So look at what you're doing. And then, of course, we have written a white paper on zero party data and just making sure you have that value exchange to make sure that your customers are willing to share their data with you so that you can use a technology like a clean room to your highest benefit.
Yeah, again, by the way, for the audience, uh, Zion and Zion has put out some really relevant white papers, and you guys had this session on zero party data and LLM integration at Digital Velocity, which we'll be putting online. So I highly recommend any of those. Let's take this last question because I think it's a new question. What's a recommended path for joining organizations as a CDP implementation specialist or a CDP owner? That's a great last question for the session.
That's a great question. I think, there are several different capacities at which you can successfully impact a CDP implementation. So if it's not on the IT side, or the engineering side, I would say for me is like a hard no. Go on the marketing side and start to really understand the customer journey within an organization and what are the touch points where the CDP makes sense. Within our organization, we have analytic strategists, we have members of our digital media and marketing teams, we have email marketing specialists who are all CDP certified because in what they're doing, they're touching customer data, they're impacting emails and ads that customers are receiving. So they are naturally going to find a place to understand the CDP audiences. The audiences that live in your CDP are living in your email marketing platform. You're just pushing them downstream so they can get deployed. So I would just recommend like anything in the CX space within an organization that has a CDP or who wants to implement a CDP creates the prime opportunity to embed yourself as a CDP specialist.
I love your answers. I feel we should chat more. Okay, we'll take this last question. Thank you. I think TB. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Uh, do you have any examples of productizing the CDP? Sort of a plug and play ecosystem template with the CDP at the heart that solves a specific need, maybe data monetization, for a category that you use to make it easier for the client to visualize and understand.
Yeah, so we've interacted with a couple brands who have ad space on their website and they want to get the highest CPM for that ad space. So they are using the CDP in order to collect behavioral data or append third-party data to people who are coming to their site and use that to display the ads where they most make sense. For the customers who are visiting. So we've done that in a couple instances of geography, by product. There is so much data to be collected based on the behaviors that people are interacting within your site. So if you have the opportunity to have ad space on your site, I would say, yes, you absolutely want a CDP so that you can monetize or increase those CPMs.
Yeah, I agree. We've used the CDP as the real time complement to data coming in, so we can go integrate with Trade Desk or LiveRamp or Newstar and make sure that we bring in any information, and suddenly that data becomes very powerful on the other side, and you can do a lot with it. So we're at time. I'm so grateful to the audience. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for staying with us. Morgan, I learned a lot. I hope the audience got what they were looking for. Please find us on LinkedIn if you guys have more questions. As you can tell, we are both highly nerdy about this topic and we love to talk about it. And yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you so
See you
much.
all in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.